My son texted me 4 words on Thanksgiving morning. "Don't come, we're full." I read it twice. Then I put on my coat, got in my car, and drove to his house anyway. What he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I was already sitting in his kitchen by the time his guests arrived. And by the end of that night, it wasn't me who left that house in shame. If you've ever been made to feel like a burden in your own family, stay till the end, because what happened at that table changed everything.
My name is Robert. I'm 71 years old, and for most of my life, I thought I understood my son. I raised him, I paid for his college, I co-signed his first mortgage. I thought I knew exactly where I stood with him. I was wrong. This is the story of the Thanksgiving my son tried to erase me from his life, and the one conversation, 12 minutes long, that put everything back where it belonged. Before I go further, if you're new here, I tell true stories about family, betrayal, and the moment the tables finally turn. If that's the kind of story you need today, hit subscribe, because trust me, this one gets worse before it gets better. Now, let's go back to where it all started. Not that morning, 3 years before it.
My wife, Carol, passed away 3 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. Fast, brutal, over in 5 months. I won't dwell on that. This isn't that kind of story. But I need you to understand something. When she died, I didn't just lose a wife. I lost the person who had always stood between me and our son, Daniel, softening things, translating things, keeping the peace. Without her, Daniel and I were just 2 men who didn't know how to talk to each other.
At first, it was small things. He'd call less. 2 weeks became a month became 2. When we did talk, the conversations were short, functional, like he was checking a box. "How are you, Dad?" "Fine." "Good, good. Listen, I've got to run." I told myself it was grief. He'd lost his mother. Give him time. Then his wife, Melissa, started handling all the communication. Every holiday invitation came from her, not him. Every family update came through her. It got to the point where I would text my own son a question, and Melissa would answer it 20 minutes later from his phone.
I noticed. I just didn't want to admit what I was noticing. Here's something I need to tell you because it matters for what comes later. I sold my hardware business 2 years ago. 31 years I ran that store. When I sold it, I didn't spend the money. I didn't take a cruise. I didn't buy a boat. I put almost all of it, $1.8 million, into a trust, quietly. My lawyer, a man named Gerald Finch, who'd known me for 20 years, helped me set it up so that nobody, and I mean nobody, would know the details unless I decided to tell them.
At the time, I told myself it was just being careful. Smart estate planning. In hindsight, some part of me already knew I might need it. Because here's the thing about Daniel and Melissa. They weren't struggling. Daniel had a decent job in commercial insurance. Melissa did marketing for a tech company. But somewhere in the last 2 years, their lifestyle changed. New car, a bigger house, a house I'll add that I helped them put a down payment on 18 months earlier, a loan that was never repaid and never mentioned again. Private school for my grandson Ethan, vacations posted on Facebook that I only found out about after they'd already happened. I want to be clear. I never resented them for wanting a good life. What I resented, what quietly ate at me, was being cut out of the picture while apparently being expected to keep funding it. Last spring, I brought it up, gently. I asked Daniel over coffee if everything was okay between us, if I'd done something. He looked at me like I'd asked something absurd. "Dad, we're just busy. Don't read into it." I wanted to believe him. I really did. But then came October. Every year, without fail, Thanksgiving was at Daniel's house. It had been that way since Carol passed. It was the one holiday he insisted on hosting. Maybe out of guilt, maybe out of tradition. I never asked. I always brought the same thing. Carol's sweet potato casserole, made from her handwritten recipe card. The one with the corner stained brown from 30 years of use. In late October, I got a text from Melissa. Not a call, a text. "Hey Robert, quick heads up.
This year's Thanksgiving is going to be a little different. We're having Daniel's boss and his family over, plus my parents, plus my sister's whole crew. It's going to be pretty tight on space. We'll do a separate lunch with you sometime that week, promise. I stared at that message for a long time. A separate lunch. Like I was a client being fit into a schedule. Like I was an obligation to be handled outside of business hours. I called Daniel directly. He picked up on the fourth ring, sounding distracted.
Hey, Dad. Yeah, Melissa mentioned she was going to text you about Thanksgiving. She did, I said. I wanted to check with you directly. Is that really how you want to do this? There was a pause. A long one. And then he said the words I don't think I'll ever fully stop hearing. Look, Dad, it's not a big deal. It's just this year. My boss is up for a promotion, and Melissa thinks it'd be good if I hosted him. Make a good impression, you know? And with her family coming too, it's just a lot. It's not personal. Not personal? I repeated.
Don't make this a thing, Dad. We'll see you before Christmas. I hung up without saying goodbye. I don't think I said a single other word. For 3 days, I told myself I would accept it gracefully. I'm not a man who makes scenes. Carol used to say I had the patience of a saint and the stubbornness of a mule. And for those 3 days, the saint was winning. Then, on the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, my grandson Ethan called me. He's 11, sharp as a tack, and closer to me than either of his parents probably realize.
Grandpa, are you coming Thursday? Mom said you might not be able to make it this year. Something in his voice, a kind of careful hopefulness, like he already suspected the answer, broke something open in me. I don't know yet, buddy, I told him. We'll see. After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen for a long time. Carol's recipe card was still taped inside my cabinet door, right where she'd left it. And I thought about something she used to say to me, back when Daniel was a teenager and testing every boundary he could find.
Robert, you don't fight a closed door. You just find the window. So that Thursday morning when the text came, "Don't come, we're full," I didn't argue, I didn't call, I didn't send an angry reply. I got in my car. I want to explain something before I go further, because I know how this might sound. I wasn't going there to crash a party or make a scene in front of Daniel's boss. That was never the plan. I had a key.
I'd had a key to that house since the day they moved in. Since I'd handed them the check for the down payment, actually. Half joking that a father should always have a key to his son's front door. Daniel had laughed and said, "Sure, Dad, in case of emergencies." I let myself in through the side door, into the kitchen, at 10:40 in the morning, 2 hours before the guests were set to arrive. Melissa was upstairs getting ready. Daniel was out front moving lawn chairs into the garage. Nobody heard the door.
I sat down at the small breakfast table, tucked into that kitchen, the same table where I used to have coffee with Ethan on weekend mornings, back when I was still welcome for weekend mornings. I set Carol's casserole dish down in front of me, and I waited. You might be wondering why. Why sit there? Why not just leave a note, or turn around, or accept the exile with dignity?
Here's the honest answer. I wasn't there to make a point about Thanksgiving. I was there because 3 days earlier, Gerald Finch, my lawyer, had called me with information that changed the entire shape of this story. Information about a phone call Daniel had made to his own attorney 2 weeks prior. Information about a plan involving my house, my trust, and a document called a power of attorney that I had never signed, never seen, and never agreed to.
I'll get to exactly what that call revealed in a moment, but I need you to understand, by the time I sat down in that kitchen, I wasn't the same man who'd quietly accepted 3 years of being pushed to the margins. I was a man holding a folder. At 11:15, Melissa came downstairs in her Thanksgiving dress, saw me, and stopped so suddenly her heels squeaked on the tile. "Robert," she said. Just my name, nothing else. "Good morning, Melissa," I said. "I brought the casserole." Carol's recipe. I know it's tradition.
She didn't move. She just called out in a voice pitched just a little too high. "Daniel? Daniel, can you come here?" Daniel walked in, still holding a folding chair. When he saw me sitting there, at that little table, in his kitchen, on the day he'd explicitly told me not to come, his face went through about 4 different expressions in the space of 2 seconds. Shock, embarrassment, something that might have been anger, and underneath all of it, something that looked almost like fear. "Dad, what? I told you, we're—"
"I know what you told me," I said, keeping my voice level. Carol always said my calm voice was scarier than my angry one, and I understood, in that moment, exactly what she meant. "I'm not staying for the dinner, Daniel. I know I'm not welcome for the dinner. I came because we need to talk before your guests arrive, and I didn't think you'd make time otherwise." "This isn't the time. It's the only time you've given me in 2 months. Melissa stepped forward, arms crossing. "Robert, I really think you should go. This isn't fair to us. We have people coming in less than an hour."
And this is the part I want you to really hear, because it's the moment everything shifted. I opened the folder I'd brought with me. I set it on the table, right next to Carol's casserole dish, and I slid it toward my son. "Then let's be quick," I said. Inside that folder were 3 documents. The first was a printout of an email, one that Gerald had obtained, entirely legally, because it had been sent to a shared family email account that I still technically had access to, an account set up years ago for organizing Carol's medical care, which nobody had ever thought to close. In that email, dated 3 weeks earlier, Daniel had written to an estate attorney, not Gerald, a different one, someone he'd apparently sought out specifically, asking about options for managing an aging parent's assets and the process for establishing power of attorney when the parent is
Uncooperative. That was the word he used. About me. The second document was a draft power of attorney form. Unsigned, but drafted, with my name, my address, and Daniel listed as the designated agent, meaning that if this document had ever been signed, or if it had been signed under circumstances I wasn't fully aware of, Daniel would have had legal authority over my finances, my medical decisions, my property, everything.
I watched my son's face as he read those 2 pages. He went pale, genuinely pale, the color draining out of him the way it does when a person realizes they've been caught doing something they believed no one would ever see. "Dad, it's not what it looks like. That was just, we were exploring options in case something happened to you. That's all. Families do that kind of planning."
"Then why didn't you ask me?" I said. "Why did you go to a lawyer I've never heard of instead of Gerald, who's handled my affairs for 20 years? Why did you write the word uncooperative about your own father in an email 3 weeks before telling me there wasn't room for me at your Thanksgiving table?" He didn't have an answer. Melissa did, though. She always did.
"You don't understand the pressure we're under," she said, her voice cracking now, somewhere between anger and panic. "Daniel's boss is deciding on the promotion this month. We took out loans on the house renovation. We are drowning, Robert. And you're sitting on God knows how much money doing nothing with it. And you won't even talk to us about a plan for the future." "You wanted a plan for my future," I said quietly, "or a plan for my money." Nobody said anything for a moment. Outside, I could hear a car pulling into the driveway, the first of the guests, right on schedule. And then I pulled the 3rd document out of the folder. This one was from Gerald. A simple letter, on his firm's letterhead, confirming what he and I had finalized just 4 days earlier. The full and complete restructuring of my trust. The trust that held $1.8 million. The trust that, as of that Monday, no longer named Daniel as primary beneficiary. I hadn't cut him out completely. I want to be honest about that, because this was never about revenge for its own sake. I'd redirected 60% of the trust into a fund earmarked directly for Ethan's education, administered independently, completely outside of Daniel and Melissa's control, accessible only when he turned 18. The remaining 40% I designated to a scholarship fund at the community college where Carol used to volunteer, in her name. Daniel would still inherit my house, eventually, when I passed. That part I couldn't bring myself to change. He was still my son. But the money he and Melissa had apparently already been quietly maneuvering to control, was gone. Placed somewhere neither of them could touch it, for a grandson who still called to ask if I was coming to dinner. "You had no right," Melissa started.
I had every right, I said, standing up now, buttoning my coat. It's my money. It was always my money. I built that business for 31 years, while you two were building a life I was apparently only useful for funding. Daniel hadn't said a word in almost a minute. He was just staring at the letter, and I watched something break in his face. Not anger anymore, something closer to grief. Maybe he was grieving the version of himself that hadn't done this. I don't know. I've had a lot of time to think about that expression since, and I still don't fully understand it.
"Dad," he finally said, "please, don't do this. Not today." "I already did it 4 days ago," I said. "Today, I just came to tell you to your face, instead of letting you find out from a letter after the fact. I thought you deserved that much." Through the front window, I could see his boss's car parked at the curb, a family climbing out, laughing about something, completely unaware they were about to walk into the wreckage of what used to be a family. "I'll let myself out the side door," I said. "Enjoy your dinner."
I want to tell you what happened after, because the story doesn't end at that kitchen table. Endings like that are easy to write. Real life took longer to settle. For 6 weeks, Daniel didn't call. I honestly thought that might be the end of it, that I would spend whatever years I had left as a man with a house, a trust, and no son to leave either one to. Then, on a Sunday afternoon in mid-December, my doorbell rang. It was Ethan, just Ethan, standing on my porch in his winter coat, holding a paper grocery bag.
"Mom dropped me off," he said. "She's parked down the street. She said I could come say hi, but I don't think she wants Dad to know yet." Inside the bag was a container of sweet potato casserole. He'd made it himself, he told me, found Carol's recipe card, because apparently Melissa had taken a photo of it years ago, just in case, and never told anyone why. "It's probably not as good as Grandma's," he said, "but I wanted you to have Thanksgiving too, even though it's December." I'm not ashamed to tell you I cried on my own front porch, in front of an 11-year-old, for the first time since Carol's funeral.
Daniel and I talked for the first time in January. It wasn't a movie moment. There was no dramatic apology, no music swelling in the background. It was 2 men sitting at a diner, mostly quiet, occasionally honest. He told me he'd been scared of money running out, scared of failing in front of people whose opinions mattered too much to him, scared of becoming the kind of man who needed his father's help at 38 years old. He said fear had made him do something he wasn't proud of, and that he understood if I never trusted him with anything again.
I didn't reverse the trust. I want to be clear about that, because I know some of you watching might expect a neat bow at the end, everyone forgiven, everything back exactly the way it was. That's not what happened, and honestly, I don't think it should have.
What I did instead was simple. I told him the door was open, not the vault, the door. He could come to Sunday dinners. He could bring Ethan. He could rebuild, slowly, the kind of relationship that isn't measured in dollar amounts. But the money stays exactly where I put it. Because some decisions, once you understand why you had to make them, you don't take back just because the person who forced your hand is finally sorry.
It's been 8 months now. Daniel comes to dinner most Sundays. Melissa hasn't. Not yet. And I don't push it. Ethan spends most Saturdays at my place. And last month, he asked if I'd teach him how his great-grandfather's old tools worked. The same tools that started that hardware store 34 years ago.
I think about that Thanksgiving morning a lot. About sitting in that kitchen, waiting, with a casserole dish and a folder that would change everything.
I think about how easy it would have been to just accept the text message, "Don't come, we're full," to swallow it, the way I'd swallowed so many small erasures over the previous 3 years. But Carol was right all those years ago. You don't fight a closed door. You find the window.
If this story meant something to you, if you've ever sat at the edge of your own family, wondering when you became optional, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. And if you want to hear what happened the following Thanksgiving, when Daniel asked to host again, and what I decided to do about it, let me know, because that's a story too. Thank you for sitting with me through this one. I'll see you in the next video.